This is the Chris DeGaulle Show podcast.
Okay, guys, let's just rip. And Chris DeGaulle.
Chris DeGaulle. Chris, thanks for being with me tonight.
Chris DeGaulle.
I'm joined now by Chris DeGaulle.
Now, he puts the broad in broadband. It's Chris DeGaulle.
The Chris DeGaulle podcast is presented by usmedicalplan.com. Save big money monthly and get better health coverage at usmedicalplan.com.
It's Friday, the 6th day of October. Thanks so much for downloading the Chris DeGaulle Show podcast. Coming up today, a fascinating conversation with Dr. Robert Malone. You remember him? He is the, I guess, the original inventor of what's known as mRNA. It's super scientific and super technical, but basically it's the roadmap, the building blocks of vaccine development, as I understand it. That's probably oversimplified. If there's a scientist listening, you're cringing at that overly simplified description. But it was notable this week that there were two University of Pennsylvania scientists who were given the Nobel Prize for developing the COVID shot. And I saw that. I was kind of interested in it. We reached out to Dr. Malone because it's been a bit. And as he has been kind of in the field of shots and vaccines, I thought it would be good to check back in with him to explain what we know about scientists developing these shots and what kind of money was made and where does that stand and where does he stand on the shot today. And then we get into kind of an interesting conversation about doctors in general. Do you trust your doctor? What's your doctor's position been on the shot in the past? It's interesting. And he is not a bombastic guy. He doesn't, make broad sweeping generalizations about how you should decide your medicine, but he is some food for thought, and I think it's always important to continue to talk to people who are about medical choice and medical freedom. We like more discussion, more ideas, more questions, and that's what this conversation does. It's not one of these, blind faith, trust your doctor, never ask questions kind of conversations. I think we can all benefit from that, so that's coming up. Joe Biden is apparently abusing his dog. Hillary Clinton and Liz Cheney on the same day both pop their heads out of their respective holes and make their continued nonsense charges that the end of the world is near if Donald Trump gets anywhere close. Actors, too. Hollywood actors everybody's head is on fire again. Now that Jim Jordan may become speaker, Donald Trump seems to still be gaining steam in the Republican field. They are apoplectic. I mean, losing their minds and now talking about re-education camps. I'm kind of not kidding. So we're going to unpack all that and lots more news. Sit tight. John Ruhlman at usmedicalplan.com. usmedicalplan.com. Call him today. Call his team today and tell him, here's the insurance. In fact, I'm looking at insurance now. I'm evaluating as I speak to you today. I'm evaluating my new year and the health savings account that I have for me and my family. Is it the best coverage? Could I get better coverage from another company that John has rather than through my employer? Maybe not. I mean, oftentimes what John will tell you is if you have insurance through your employer, it may be the best there is. Maybe not. So I don't know what you're having taken out of your check every month, but have you investigated it by calling John and saying, hey, we're about to sign up for benefits. Here's what I pay right now. Could you do better? Could you find me better? He works with 80 different private health insurers out there. So if you have no insurance and you've never bought it because you think you can't afford it, particularly if you're a younger and healthier person, you're making a terrible mistake. You can get like platinum insurance coverage for very little money if you're reasonably healthy. And even if you're not altogether well, that doesn't mean you can't get good, affordable insurance. John knows this stuff like the back of his hand. His customer care team was developed to help people like you leave a very expensive, cumbersome problem you may be having with your health insurance and transition to something that makes sense for you. They navigate the bureaucracy. They handle all the transitioning. They handle the paperwork. They'll even intercede if you're in the middle of a conflict with your health insurance right now. Let them become your advocate. John Ruhlman, usmedicalplan.com. You seniors on a fixed income, you buy a supplemental plan for Medicare, come on. 877-410-4321. 877-410-4321 or usmedicalplan.com. Stunned, they're just saying it now. I was saying to a friend of mine a couple of days ago, they're just not hiding it anymore. They're not even trying. The destruction, the mind control, they're on the march. They feel emboldened. They believe they control and seemingly do control the legislative branch for the most part. They certainly control the executive, and they believe that, they can weaponize and engage in lawfare. And so they feel pretty good. DOJ, FBI, CIA, all the intel, military, they think they run the show. And as such, you people that haven't had your minds right yet, in short order, they'll deal with you, dispatch with you, or send you off to a camp where you'll get your mind right there if you're not willing to do it voluntarily. So let's go right to it. Hillary Clinton yesterday talking about you MAGA extremists and taking your marching orders and how this has got to stop. She's concerned about it, and she wants you to do something about it now before she forces you to.
And party as it is today. Mm-hmm. And sadly, so many of those extremists, those MAGA extremists, take their marching orders from Donald Trump, who has no credibility left by any measure. He's only in it for himself. He's now defending himself in civil actions and criminal actions. And when do they break with him? Because at some point, maybe there needs to be a formal deprogramming of the cult members, but something needs to happen.
And how do you do?
Yeah, and how do you do that? I'd like to hear her continue on with that answer. How do you deprogram the cult members, Mrs. Clinton? Out of curiosity. Judge Tanya Chutkan, in July of 2023, Julie Kelly reminds us, after sentencing a Trump supporter to 7 months in prison on 4 misdemeanors, said, quote, "I really encourage you in the time you have to broaden your sources of information, to consider reading some viewpoints that are different from your own, to reconsider some of the positions you've taken, and to understand that you may have been motivated by certain beliefs that may not have served you well." Oh, we do have a little more of Mrs. Clinton. Okay, yes, because I think the follow-up was, how do you intend to deprogram MAGA? Oh, I'm well. Oh, sure. Let's listen to Crooked Hacker. Answer a little more of this.
And we had very bitter battles over all kinds of things, gun control and climate change and the economy and taxes. But there wasn't this little tail of extremism wagging the dog of the Republican Party as it is today. Mm-hmm. And sadly, so many of those extremists, those MAGA extremists, take their marching orders from Donald.
This was the wind up before, sorry.
Has no credibility left by any measure. He's only in it for himself. He's now defending himself in civil actions and criminal actions. And when do they break with him? Because at some point, maybe there needs to be a formal deprogramming of the cult members, but something needs to happen.
And how do you do that? Because you said you have to defeat them by defeating their leader. Their leader is Donald Trump. Even you have said that you expect him to be the Republican nominee. How does this change at all?
At this point, I think, sadly, he will still likely be the nominee, and we have to defeat him. And we have to defeat those who are the election deniers, as we did in 2020 and 2022. And we have to just be smarter about how we are trying to empower the right people inside the Republican Party. Nancy Pelosi had a majority of 5 votes.
Yeah, all right. I've heard enough. So she didn't straight up say she wants to round us up in boxcars yet. She didn't go that far. I mean, that's what she'd like to say. She's restraining herself here. But interesting that she thinks she has a damn say, or that anyone related or close to her and her party has anything to say about who the next Speaker of the House will be. I mean, if she thinks that might tell you more about the Republican Party. And, when people say to me, why was Kevin McCarthy thrown out? Why did the Republicans rebel against him like that? If she might have tipped her hand there a little bit in that if she believes she can influence who the Republicans' next speaker is, and there seems to be a fair amount of that going on, too, by the way. I have a Fox News story in front of me today that says foreign policy experts are telling Fox News. Foreign policy experts are telling Fox News. Now, I read this story here from somebody called Kyle Morris. The stunning ouster of California Kevin as House Speaker this week sent the House of Representatives into disarray. Leaders from around the world scrupulously assessing the situation to see what happens next. The ensuing chaos that came as a result of McCarthy's removal, according to foreign policy experts who spoke with Fox News, could lead U.S. adversaries to take advantage of the crippling state of Congress on a number of fronts. The chaos in the House of Representatives and the Republican caucus is doing the U.S. reputation for governmental effectiveness no favors, says Britain's leading think tank. Allies will be concerned that the chronic instability appears to have infected the whole House leadership system. Enemies will be emboldened that the U.S. is going to be consumed by internal self-inflicted wounds and may move to seek advantage. Well, I'll be a son of a bitch. Did you know that the House of Representatives had that kind of impact, that kind of import, and that kind of responsibility? Did you know that the globe was cowering in fear with reverence and respect for the United States until the ouster of Kevin McCarthy? Did you know that? Yeah, in fact, I'm told it was Kevin McCarthy that ordered the Chinese spy balloon shot out of the sky finally after 8 days. Yeah, it was Kevin McCarthy that ordered the immediate withdrawal from Afghanistan. Yeah, it was Kevin McCarthy who sent all that money to Iran, who was engaged in the Iranian prisoner swap. It was Kevin McCarthy who's been right there smack in the middle of keeping China at bay from invading Taiwan. Little Kim, all of them, watching carefully what Kevin McCarthy was doing. Oh, you might have... Look, I know it would be, and God bless the people at Fox News with all of their intelligence people and all of their foreign policy sources who wrote this story. God bless them. I know they can be forgiven for forgetting this. We actually have a commander-in-chief. There's a feeble old husk of a guy that we're pretending is leading the country. He's called President of the United States. And actually, all of those things that I just mentioned, those are things that are under his purview, not the Speaker of the House of Representatives, not 1/2 of 1/3 of our government. So Fox is out there trying to convince you that the globe and all of the despots around the globe are rubbing their hands together because there's no Kevin McCarthy. And the Republicans are fighting about who the next leader will be. Crooked hacker surfaces yesterday out of nowhere. Don't even know why, but there's got to be a reason. And when you start to hear all of this, you assume that it's there's just a litany of stories like this today. Mark Ruffalo, the actor, posted Thursday slamming Donald Trump, calling him an enemy of America in response to a recent opinion audio piece by the New York Times. The Times published an opinion shorts audio clip titled, "Now is the time to pay attention to Trump's violent language. It's deeply problematic for American democracy if voters and Republican politicians ignore and become exhausted by Trump's language," he added. Ruffalo wrote in a response to Trump's recent comments that shoplifters should be shot. Said that effing finally, media starts to wake up. Presidential contender calling for Americans to kill and harm Americans. Let that sink in. Enemy of America from within. Meathead. Rob Reiner on Twitter yesterday. He is terrified. Excuse me, folks. He is terrified of a third-party challenge now. Did you hear Cornel West has switched from Green Party presidential candidate to independent? And there is serious talk, as we've been chronicling at the Harump Society, and I've been writing quite a bit there, that Bobby Kennedy Jr. very likely going to go independent himself. Cornel West now perhaps switching to independent, and that has Democrats like Rob Reiner terrified. He wrote yesterday on a post on X, see if I can find it here quickly. I had it. Hang with me here. Hang on. I just had it. Where'd it go? Well, long story short, he said something similar to Mark Ruffalo about Trump. that the country would be destroyed if a third-party contender is allowed. Yeah, here it is. Not exaggerating when I say that a vote for any third-party candidate will put Trump back in the White House and destroy 247 years of self-rule. So do you hear this? There is a freak out going on all of a sudden. I don't know where it's coming from, but I note its timing. You got actors in Hollywood, crooked hackers surfacing. They're all saying the same thing. The end of America as we know it. Fox News is over there reporting that foreign policy experts say this chaos in the House. They don't want Jim Jordan either. They've all been very clear. They don't want Jim Jordan, who's an agent of chaos and an ally of Trump. And Trump's going to get Americans killed, and self-rule will come to an end. And all the people that vote for this need to be sent away to a re-education camp. Yeah, but how do we do it? Asks Christiane Amanpour. How do we do that? How do we re-educate all of these mongrels? How do we do it? There's a fervor, folks. It's a bubbling, effervescing, panicky fervor. Now, let's take a look at some real news, and that is some polling from Marquette. They released a poll yesterday, and it was of likely voters. Remember, we always like to pay attention to polls of likely voters. That tells us more than anything else. And among likely voters, Biden, according to Marquette, leads Trump by 2 among likely voters. But, I say that with a but. First of all, that's of likely voters. Trump leads by 2. So certainly within the margin of error. Okay. But more importantly, on issues. Hear me now. This is important. On the issues, Biden loses his ass. So I stipulate, and this is where a lot of you get very sensitive and wound up, and I don't say that to be dismissive. I understand why it worries you. You believe that because people like Mark Ruffalo and Hillary Clinton and Meathead keep saying that the end of the world will happen if Donald Trump wins again, that has become such a prevailing point of view among so many millions of Americans that they don't care how destructive Biden is and they don't care how destructive the policies of Democrats are. All of these leftists have sung in unison for 7 years that Donald Trump equals the end of the world. You are now worried that many of your fellow Americans are willing to slit their own throats at their own personal costs. They are so frightened of, so terrified of, so angry at, filled with such hate for Donald Trump. They would rather continue to see inflation climb sky high, not be able to afford gas or groceries, and have a wide open border in a lawless city. Many of you believe that your fellow American hates Trump so much, they would rather live in this excrement storm and let it get worse before they would ever allow Trump back to the White House. I respect that many of you in this audience feel that way. Hear me when I say it, which is why I will even defer to you on this and say the Trump campaign would do well to try, if they can, and I know a lot of you say he can't, he's not capable. He's got to make it about him. Okay, I will say gently, if it's about issues, if this campaign is about the issues, that would be a great net benefit to Donald Trump or anybody else who would become the nominee, because on the issues, this Marquette poll is devastating. Who is better on the issue, head-to-head, Trump or Biden? On inflation, this is of likely voters again. Remember, 50% of likely voters, according to this new Marquette poll, 50% say Trump is, 27% Biden. Better on inflation. Devastating. On the economy generally, 52% say Trump, 28% Biden. On the issue of immigration and border security, Trump, 52%. Biden, 28%. Did you notice Biden is going to start building a wall again? Yeah, did you hear that? President Joe Biden's administration said yesterday they will add sections of border wall to stave off record migrant crossings from Mexico. Trump, the front runner for the Republican Party nomination to challenge Biden, made building border barriers a central tenet of his first campaign. One of Biden's first actions after taking office in 2021 was to issue a proclamation pledging that no more American tax dollars would be diverted to constructing border walls, as well as a review of resources that have already been committed. The administration said Thursday's action did not deviate from the president's proclamation because no money had been allocated. Or no money that was allocated during Trump's term in 2019 had to be spent now. AOC is furious at him about this, by the way. Sandy Cortez from Westchester released a statement, said the Biden administration was not required to expand construction of the border wall. They certainly were not required to waive several environmental laws to expedite the building. The president needs to take responsibility for his decision and reverse course. Hey, AOC, your governor is yelling something's got to be done because your state, your city is being overrun, AOC, and even your Democrat governor said we got to do something about the border. J.B. Pritzker, the governor of Illinois, same deal. We got to do something about the border. Biden is so up against it, his plan, and well, Obama's plan really, to flood this country with illegals and God knows who, has caught such hell that even Democrats are now begging him do some. Eric Adams, mayor of New York, is traveling to the border and saying nothing's being done here. I need help. When you have blue state Northeasterners going to the border saying we got to do something, now it's gotten so untenable. Now the issue is so vastly on the side of Republicans. Biden is using Trump allocated dollars to continue building the wall, and the AOCs of the world are furious. So back to the Marquette poll. Trump leads on inflation, 50-27. Trump leads on the economy, 52-28. On immigration and border security, Trump 52, Biden 28. Creating jobs, Trump 49, Biden 30. Foreign relations, Trump 43, Biden 38. If this is about issues, and it should be about issues, if next fall is about issues and not strictly personalities, if we don't allow ourselves to get distracted with the Mark Ruffalos and the meatheads and the Granny Crooked-ackers who are all calling us names and saying Donald Trump being elected is the apocalypse, and all of us who are going to elect him are electing monsters to bring the apocalypse. If we can just all take a breath and ignore all this hyperbole and continue to focus on those stats and the issues that I just read, everything's going to be just fine. Chicken prices in the United States, most grocery stores have now hit record highs from Reuters today. The 30-year average mortgage has now crept up to over 8%. Issues. On every front, in every direction, and you can't pick one. Look everywhere you can. Pick one issue where Democrats are winning with the American public. They're not. So what do we have instead? A bunch of hysterical, privileged leftists giving interviews and going on TV, talking about the end of democracy as we know it, and re-education camps for those of us who would support opposition to them. Never realizing the irony. Don't they see the Of course they don't. They don't hear themselves because they think they're on the side of goodness and truth and justice. But they don't hear the rich irony in saying they're so afraid of totalitarianism that anyone in the country who speaks in opposition to them must be silenced or re-educated at once. Do you hear yourself? You're so afraid of authoritarianism, you want to send us away to re-education camps in case we disagree with you politically. But make no mistake, they are terrified of Cornel West. They are terrified of Bobby Kennedy Jr. running third party. They know that's curtains for them. If Democrats who don't like Trump, if Democrats who don't like Biden have a third party option and they go there, they know they're cooked. As for Biden himself, he had a very bad day yesterday. Did Did you see the story, the video that surfaced? Judicial Watch found video of Joe Biden kicking his dog in the head. Not kidding. It's getting off Marine One, the helicopter. His, foot got tangled around. You know, this damn dog of Biden's, Commander, has now bitten something like 12 Secret Service agents, sent some of them to the hospital. This dog continues to run around the White House biting members of the security team. Now, why do dogs keep biting? Well, oftentimes it's because they haven't been socialized, they haven't been trained, or they feel in danger. Male dogs are more likely to bite than female dogs. Look this up a little bit before the show. Many reasons why dogs bite people. Dogs that have not been properly socialized or trained are more likely to bite, maybe because they don't know how to interact with people. Sometimes play biting. Puppies and adolescent dogs are more likely to bite than adult dogs. I think this is a younger dog. But if they have a history of abuse or neglect, dogs that have been abused or neglected are far more likely to bite. I tell you, I got a friend that is just fit to be tied over this dog story. I mean, it's just because he's a dog guy. He's got a couple. He loves them. They're his companions and friends, and he can't imagine hurting these dogs. I mean, I love Dean. I have a dog. I just have 3 teenagers, which are also animals in the house. So Dean is one of 3 other animals in my house right now with my wife. But for people who have pets exclusively in their lives as their companions and friends, you wouldn't ever, nor would I, you wouldn't dream of hitting, kicking your animal in the head, mistreating it in any way. Biden apparently regularly is doing so. So there are a lot of people asking the question now, is Biden beating the crap out of this dog? My only pushback on that is I don't know that Biden has the strength to kick the crap out of a dog, to be perfectly honest with you. I'm not sure. I think if that feeble old husk kicks a German Shepherd one too many times, he becomes a very, very old chew toy. So, I don't know, ladies and gentlemen. There's a lot of ratcheted up rhetoric out there today, is all I've noticed. It has just, they went from 0 to 60 yesterday on the, and mind you, Trump is in the middle of lawfare like we've never witnessed in American history. We've never seen a United States president treated this way. Never. We've never seen a United States president indicted 4 times, 90-some criminal counts or something. He's been in a courtroom all week long, and it's this week all of a sudden that they are screeching that we're in danger, our democracy's in danger, a totalitarian state is coming. If this man is not stopped, he's encouraging violence toward other Americans. We got to do something. The Jim Jordan must not become speaker. Why this renewed? It's interesting, isn't it? I thought Donald Trump was so legally tied up in court with so many indictments, there was no way he was going to see the light of day. They were going to get him in a jumpsuit, in leg irons, and lock him away with all of these criminal court cases, right? Why are they so hysterical then? Why the abject hysterics over Trump today? Isn't it interesting? I'm a trained student of these things, and I notice trends, and we're right in the middle of a huge wave of Trump derangement, the likes of which we haven't seen in a bit. Which tells me they're getting scared as hell. They're seeing the polls. They're seeing the possibility of a third party, a couple of legitimate third-party contenders. They know Joe Biden and Democrats are losing on the issues while they're purposely destroying the country. And they don't seem to be able to dissuade a lot of you MAGA types to ditch Trump. So now they're calling for re-education camps, Mrs. Clinton. At some point, maybe there needs to be a formal deprogramming. Come and get me, you old hag. Come and get me. Okay, how are the finances looking this year? It's a tough time for everybody, and making sure you're financially squared away is critically important. You're looking in the rearview mirror to last year, thinking ahead to 2023. And if you're ready to review your financial situation, I hope you do it with Jason Perrette, financial advisor at Eagle Wealth Planning. He's got a passion for this stuff, providing financial services if you're looking to pursue financial independence, true independence, whether you're in retirement, whether you're brand new and just starting out, or you have no retirement savings at all. You're just kind of wanting to get a start, or you're not really happy with who you currently have as an advisor. Jason focuses on producing consistent results for his clients based on their unique financial goals. His main objective is to help you pursue each and every one of your goals. Because he's a fiduciary, he provides clients with complete wealth management and investment services, and it's very personalized and professional. So he can help accomplished entrepreneurs, professionals, retirees, and like I said, even young people get started on pursuing financial independence for the long term. He regularly checks in and revisits your goals too, and assess your risk tolerance and strategies to provide you with a high level of service at the same time. And Jason often likes to say, look, sometimes maybe we're not a fit. I mean, you got to get to know him. He's got to get to know you, and maybe sometimes your goals aren't his. He's got a long-term strategy for your financial health. And so if you want to reach out and talk with him about a new way forward, I hope you'll call today, 816-394-8117, 816-394-8017. Eagle Wealth Partners is linked to my website, by the way, at chrisstigall.com. So if you want to go to chrisstigall.com, you'll click on the website there, and it'll take you right to Jason. You can email him, Jason at eaglewealthplanning.com, eaglewealthplanning.com. Have a discussion about the way forward with your finances. Securities and advisory services offered through Cetera Advisors, LLC, member FINRA, SIPC, a broker-dealer and a registered investment advisor. Cetera is under separate ownership from any other named entity. But when I start to hear things like Hillary Clinton talking about, we got to do something, we got to have a formal deprogramming of the cult members, something needs to happen. When I read people like Mark Ruffalo, the actor, saying Trump is an enemy of America, or that, when Meathead says if Trump's elected, 247 years of self-rule will come to an end. That kind of rhetoric, that Donald Trump is the end of the country as we know it, and anyone who supports him is some sort of enemy combatant. As Julie Kelly has pointed out, judges in these January 6th cases are saying similar things. Why don't you take some time in prison to think about who you support and what you believe? So we've known about government collusion with our media, but what about, and I mentioned this briefly yesterday, and I didn't get to spend enough time on it. I want to ruminate on this a little more because our neighbors to the north are an interesting specimen. And because they're, we got a lot of people in government that are just gaga over Justin Trudeau, the dreamy, flowing hair of the effeminate prime minister up there in Canada. There are a lot of leftists that just love him and the way he does things. So I pay attention to him. And he's been up to no good when it comes to Canadian news media. Just to reset the table here briefly, you'll remember why I kept asking there were no real meaningful shots, live video shots of the Canadian wildfires, which, incidentally, again, have you heard anything about that? Any update? From coast to coast in Canada, apparently hundreds of millions of acres of forest fires all summer long raging. Never heard any follow-up on it at all. Never saw really any meaningful video or pictures. Never saw how it concluded. We apparently were sending people up there to help fight it. Never heard anything about it. We just occasionally, throughout the course of the last several months, get updates on don't go outside because it's too smoky today. And people would say, why? And they'd say, Canadian wildfires. And that was it. They'd never show you a single photo, never a picture, never an aerial. I always thought that was weird. Well, it turned out, and I can't independently verify this, but I think it's true, Facebook does not allow anybody to post anything related to Canadian news. Did you know this? Sorry, this is redundant for those of you that already heard me talk about it, but I think it's just an important thing to keep an eye on because I could see this very thing coming our way. Canadian media, that is traditional Canadian media, and media that is somewhat funded by Canadian government. I think they call that the CBC up there, which is sort of equivalent to PBS here or NPR, taxpayer-funded broadcasting. But the CBC has a much bigger footprint. commercial media in Canada is not nearly as big as it is here in the United States. They have fewer outlets, and I think at least one of the kind of seminal, most trusted names in Canadian media is somewhat government funded. I don't know if it's entirely, but somewhat. Anyway, like here in the United States, Canadians are not consuming traditional Canadian media, like we're not consuming traditional American media. So the Canadian government said, tell you what we're going to do. We're going to stimulate Canadian media by injecting more taxpayer funds into Canadian media. We're going to give a media bailout of sorts. Kind of like what we've done in this country with the car companies and the banks in the past. Canadian government said we're going to give media money. Now, in addition to that stimulus came new rules that said if anybody uses your stories, if anybody uses anything related to the media, the information that you produce, so say it this way, if the CBC reports on a particular story and then I, Chris Stigall, want to post that story from the CBC on my Facebook site, it is Facebook's responsibility to make sure that the CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting Company, gets a cut, gets a, they want to treat news, it's a better way to say it. You go to iTunes and you download a tune and you pay what? What are most songs now? $1.29, $1.30 something? If you want to download a song to your phone or whatever. That's what the Canadian government wants to do to media news stories. Anybody that would use, share, post a news story published by Canadian media, they got to pay for it. Well, Facebook just said, no, we're not going to. So Facebook will not, if you try to share some Canadian media, if not most Canadian media, as I understand it, Facebook won't even allow you to do it. They'll take it down because they don't want to be on the hook. So there were a lot of Canadians who were complaining that they didn't know about the state of the fires. They didn't know how bad. Some villages and people died because they couldn't get proper information from their typical information channels. Canada has been trying to tighten the reins on who has access to traditional media. You see, now this story came out a couple of weeks ago, and I told you about it, but didn't spend a ton of time on it. News that online streamers and podcasters will soon be required to register with Canada's broadcasting regulator, raising confusion and concerns that heavier regulation may be coming. Last Friday afternoon, the Canadian Radio Television Communications Commission announced that online streaming and podcast services operating in Canada with $10 million or more in annual revenue in the country will have to register with them before November 28th. Registration involves providing the legal name of a company, its address, its telephone number, and email, and what type of service it offers. In its decision, the CRTC called registration a very light burden. Now, Victoria, you're a younger person than me. You consume a lot of conservative news. I know this about you. But you don't consume news maybe the way I do. The way you get your information is probably distinctly different than the way I do. I think we share some sites, but as a younger woman, when you're interested in finding out about the latest news, where do you go? First thing.
I'm actually big on Instagram now, or Twitter.
Aha.
Which, you know,
that's where you get, seriously, like,
answer.
you get, so I'm not mocking, I'm just trying to clarify. You get news from Instagram.
I do.
In
clips. Whatever.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you wake up Monday morning and you say, I want to know about the latest headlines of the day, the first place you might go is where? No wrong answer, just curious.
So there's actually, this is bad because I don't remember the exact accounts, but they're kind of conservative leaning Instagram accounts. I don't remember all their names, so sorry about that. But or Twitter, I'll scroll. Or sometimes if I'm eating breakfast, I'll turn on Fox or just flip through. But lately I'm not as much.
Yeah.
But so I guess that's kind of typical. I do like to read some articles. I scroll through Town Hall sometimes.
Town Hall.
So yeah. So yeah, I guess that's what I do. Switches from day to day, but usually Instagram, Twitter, sometimes Facebook. I'm less on Facebook now.
Well, you have illustrated my point beautifully, actually, because you've just demonstrated what we're talking about here. As a younger person, you are now not seeking out someone your parents or grandparents' age might turn on the evening news. Mm-hmm. You don't even monkey around with that. You go straight to Instagram or Town Hall or something like that. You're not interested in flipping on a 6 o'clock broadcast somewhere.
My mom watches, so when I'm over, when I'm, with my mom, she watches NPR, so I'm exposed to that. But then I walk out of the room.
But my point is, they don't have, the government does not have anything to do right now with Town Hall. They do a bit, maybe you could argue with Instagram, but here's what I'm saying. When Hillary Clinton says things like, at some point, there needs to be a formal deprogramming of cult members. And you're one of those cultists, Victoria. Congratulations. So am I. They got to figure out what to do about you because you're out there consuming a bunch of stuff that they don't approve. And much like in Canada, if Canada has decided our mainstream media outlets are struggling, so we're going to bail them out by giving them taxpayer dollars. And as for any challengers that may come to our approved taxpayer bailed out media, we're going to make them register with us too. So I want you to imagine the Daily Wire, Ben Shapiro's outfit, or Glenn Beck's outfit, The Blaze. I want you to imagine the government having more of or Town Hall. Imagine the government having a formal registration of their businesses and then increased monitoring of what they put out and increased pressure on those who would share their information. That people would have to pay for it as long as the government is bailing them out and giving them money. It's pretty insidious. Now, there's sort of a soft arrangement like that happening right now. Elon Musk, for instance, under investigation by the Securities and Exchange Commission, inquiring whether Musk broke federal law in 2022 when he bought stock in the platform. So the SEC is coming after Elon Musk and his ownership of Twitter. We already know what the federal government has been doing with Mark Zuckerberg's Meta, which runs Facebook and Instagram. They lost control of Twitter. That makes them mad. And remember again, Hillary Clinton, at some point there needs to be a formal deprogramming. Watch what Canada's doing. You see what's happening? Do you see it all? I mean, you can see how this is working, how these people... Independent media, or where you can go to get information on your own, is a great danger to them. They can't control it. They got to figure out how to rein it back in. It was pretty cool when they could pick up the phone there at DOJ and tell who was the guy that was running? I forget the guy that was running Twitter before Elon Musk. But it was pretty cool when they could pick up the phone and say, "Hey, there's Hunter Biden laptop stuff is trending on Twitter. You need to shut that stuff down right now." And Twitter would gladly do it to be helpful. Mark Zuckerberg still continuing to be more than happy to help the federal government, the Democrats, in making sure you don't see information they don't want you to see. The Canadian government is going one further and saying any challenges to our official sanctioned state-run media, we're now going to need you to officially register with the federal government so we can keep a sharp eye on you. So just be very mindful. I know you are. Be on high alert for the way these people talk. Be on high alert for the way they move and the way they try to control messaging. They are distinctly interested in making sure that all flows of information are parroting what they want parroted. And they're either going to try to do it through bullying and intimidation or financial incentive, one way or the other, or both. I told you about this yesterday, but just again, a Swiss writer being jailed for insulting lesbian journalist. A court in Switzerland fined and sentenced a writer and pundit to 60 days in jail for calling a journalist a fat lesbian. On Monday, a controversial French-Swiss polemicist named Alain Bonnet, who goes by Elaine Sorrell, and is a noted Holocaust denier, was sentenced by the courts for the crime of defamation, discrimination, and incitement to hatred when he called another journalist a fat lesbian. So you hear this? Defamation, discrimination, and incitement to hatred. Careful now. Give me Hillary Clinton again. Number 49.
Party as it is today. And sadly, so many of those extremists, those MAGA extremists, take their marching orders from Donald Trump, who has no credibility left by any measure. He's only in it for himself. He's now defending himself in civil actions and criminal actions. And when do they break with him? Because at some point, maybe there needs to be a formal deprogramming of the cult members, but something needs to happen.
And how do you do?
No, that's not. No, would you stop it? That is not what I meant. It was purely coincidental I mentioned fat lesbian and played that clip. I was asking Victoria earlier this morning where she gets her news, and it occurred to me that I didn't even think. I got to make you an honorary member of the Harumph Society. I'm sorry that I haven't done that yet, because if you want to know what's going on, the Harumph Society subscription is the place to be. In fact, all the recent news that I've been talking about justifies a subscription to the Harumph Society unto itself. I have been all over third-party candidate possibilities. I have been all over identifying issues over personality being the key here. I talked about earlier, during the show, I talked earlier about how issues, Trump and Republicans wallop Biden and Democrats on the issues. But the minute you say the name Trump, all of a sudden, the discussion changes. Now, I know some of you, again, as I said, say that that's exactly the problem and the reason why. I'm not entirely sure DeSantis wouldn't suffer the same fate, or pick your Republican. They want to make it personality-driven because they don't want to talk about the issues. I don't think we have to take debate on that. Now, some of you, I can also hear some of you saying, Trump can't help himself. Okay, whatever. But my point is, the Harumph Society has been all over this. I've been talking about this. We've talked about Obama's role in all of this chaos since day one. So, if you happen to be a younger conservative out there, like Victoria, I'd love to have you aboard. It's I try to make it as inexpensive as possible because, remember, I still got to pay rent to the Harumph Society host, which is Substack, and my digital team. So it's not a money-making venture. It is a private messaging site for me. It's where I can go and talk to you, and you can talk to me, and most of all, talk with one another, and we vote on issues, and we share opinions back and forth with one another, and I don't have to worry about trolls and haters and censorship. Substack's been a tremendous host. So it's called the Harumph Society. It's a 3 times a week newsletter. I publish it every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. In fact, I have a contest going on this week. Today would be a very good day to join the Harumph Society because today is the last day that you can register to win our grand prize. If you pick the correct day, Joe Biden steps aside. And I believe that day is coming because I believe Democrats are starting to get increasingly fearful that if he doesn't get out of the way, they're going to lose. And they're going to lose to somebody because Cornel West or Bobby Kennedy Jr. becomes a third-party candidate. So I think time is ticking for the Husk. I think they're shoving him out. I think they're going to make him step aside if he won't do it on his own. And I want you to pick the day. If you correctly, in the comments section of the Harumph Society, you got to be a subscriber to do this. You correctly note the day that you think he's going to step aside. You'll win the $250 gift card, and I'm going to give a runner-up second place prize, a $100 gift card, to the second closest guess. In the event of a tie, I also ask you to submit not just the day you think he's going to resign, but also, or step aside, not resign, but step aside, not run. Give us the reason why you think. So both the date and the reason he'll use to get out of the race. That's the contest going on at the Harumph Society. Today is the last day to enter that contest. And it's got to be between now and the nomination convention next year. The nominating convention, I forget which city they're in. Doesn't matter. So you can't, the answer can't be after he wins, he'll step down. It's got to be prior to the convention. If he doesn't step down before the convention, then the contest is null and void. But Again, that's the Harumph Society, fastest growing political newsletter on Substack right now, I'm proud to say. You guys have just been awesome. We're coming up on a 1-year anniversary of the Harumph Society, and I just couldn't be prouder of it. So all the things that are news right now, we have been talking about together. If you're a Harumpher, you know this, for weeks and weeks and weeks. Glad to have you along. Liz Cheney, on the same day Granny Crooked Hacker stuck her head out of the sand, Liz Cheney did the same. All the globalists are all lashing out at the same time. Here's what old Liz had to say about ousting Kevin McCarthy as Speaker.
When Kevin McCarthy, at every moment over the course of the last 2 years, has done more to enable and collaborate with and apologize for Donald Trump. Kevin McCarthy stood on the House floor an hour after the Capitol had been cleared and said that the objections should continue. He released security tapes to Tucker Carlson. He refused to abide by a subpoena that had been issued by the Select Committee, and on and on and on. So the Democrats made what is a principled and honorable, and in my view, the right decision to say we cannot abide by that. The Republicans need to choose their speaker. They're in the majority.
10 seconds.
We are not going to help to enable somebody who has done those things and who has apologized and appeased Donald Trump. I think they did exactly the right thing, and it was a courageous show of leadership.
What a scumbag. And she's being applauded. I don't know where she was speaking, and I don't care. But if she's being applauded for saying the Democrats voted on principle, what a disgusting display, Liz Cheney. Kevin McCarthy dared to hand over the people's footage to the people, to Tucker Carlson for review. Is she not? She's the worst. Just the worst. So again, if you follow this to its logical conclusion, then you have to say that Liz Cheney just applauded Matt Gaetz. So the 8 Republicans, Nancy Mace and Matt Gaetz, did the principled thing in ousting Kevin McCarthy. Right? Why didn't she applaud Matt Gaetz? Well, because that brings us to Jim Jordan. Both Hillary Clinton and Liz Cheney are saying the same things about Jim Jordan. Here's what Liz Cheney has to say about the possibility of Jim Jordan becoming the next speaker. And this tells you all you need to know about who they really fear and what really concerns them, that someone would actually become effective in this chair.
Jim Jordan knew more about what Donald Trump had planned for January 6th than any other member of the House of Representatives. Jim Jordan was part of the conspiracy in which Donald Trump was engaged as he attempted to overturn the election. Jim Jordan, if you think about the extent to which people have now said, well, it was Speaker Pelosi's fault that Donald Trump's mob invaded the Capitol, that, the security wasn't sufficient enough.
It wasn't.
The person who knew, there were probably more than just Jim, but there was a handful of people, of which he was the leader, who knew what Donald Trump had planned.
What?
Now, somebody needs to ask Jim Jordan, why didn't you report to the Capitol Police what you knew Donald Trump had planned? You were in those meetings at the White House.
Okay, yeah, you can cut out. So, she is asserting that Jim Jordan knew that people were going to bust into the Capitol building, is what she just said of Jim Jordan. I don't know if Jim Jordan has the ability to do it. I hope he sues her ass off. I really hope Jim Jordan sues her for defamation. Because number one, Donald Trump made no plans. There was no such plan. There's been no proof of any plan that Trump or anyone else organized, engineered, encouraged, stoked, cheered on the idea that people would break into the Capitol. That is utter nonsense. And then to go even further and implicate a member of Congress in a plot to invade the Capitol building with the president. This woman is so full of garbage and excrement. Vicious, nasty Democrat. And I tell you, these Cheneys, I am embarrassed of myself as a younger man. The way I fell headlong for the Cheneys, for the Cheney name and the Cheney family. These are awful people. Despicable, loathsome people, these Cheneys. Warmongers, war profiteers, the worst of the worst. Really awful people. Trump told Pelosi to bring in the National Guard. That was Trump's plan. Trump specifically said, let's bring in the National Guard. They did not. They refused. Pelosi said no. That's the actual historical fact, Ms. Cheney. So who's at fault? Nancy Pelosi's at fault. Hillary Clinton also reacting to Jim Jordan yesterday.
It's said that the main contenders for his position are Jim Jordan, who you know very well from Benghazi.
Oh, I don't know him well. I watched him and stared at him for 11 hours while he made stuff up about me. So I don't know him, but I've seen him in action.
So what will it mean if he gets the speakership?
Well, I mean, he is one of the principal ringleaders of the circus that's been created in the Republican Party for the last several years. I have no inside knowledge about what the Republicans will do, who they will end up voting for. But when do they put the country first? They do not represent a majority of even the Republican Party. When you look at the extremists in the House, they certainly don't represent a majority of the country.
Yeah.
And, somebody has to stand up and say enough.
Yeah.
We can have disagreements.
That's enough. I don't need any more. Why do all these women look the same? Why do all these vicious, nasty, petulant women look the same? They all look the same. Forget it, Chris. Bite your tongue. You're just going to get in trouble. They literally... Can you tell the difference between Hillary Clinton and Liz Cheney, really, fundamentally? I mean, really, is there much difference? One wears glasses. They're the same woman. The same unhappy, miserable, globalist, money-grubbing, big government, shrill harpies. That's all they are. And the notion that she would have the country's interests at heart, or that Liz Cheney... Are these women on the side of the issues the American people care the most about? Are these women on the side of reducing inflation? Are these women on the side of securing our borders? Are these women on the side of limiting our funding, if not pulling back on funding from Ukraine, or pouring endless amounts of money into Ukraine? I know the answer. Liz Cheney and Hillary Clinton are identical. Continue to pour limitless amounts of money. All the money Ukraine wants, keep sending it there for as long as it takes. Never mind the graft that has now been uncovered. A lot of top lieutenants have now supposedly been ousted because of the graft and corruption over money that we've sent there. Do you know that? Probably don't even hear much about that. Not that that should surprise any of us. And there are reports out there. I can't verify them, so I'm not going to dig into it too much. There are reports that there are a lot of people inside Washington, D.C. who are personally profiting on the backside. Tax money goes pouring in, and in turn they get their beaks wet by doing business with Ukraine. That shouldn't surprise you. I mean, Biden's at the helm of that. That's what he's been doing. These are really bad people. And they certainly do not have your interests at heart. The issues Republicans care about, the issues most voters care about, Republicans represent, not Democrats. That's it. On the issues, the American people, the majority of the American people, side with Republicans, not Democrats. That new Marquette poll that I shared with you today says so. So don't be fooled when you hear people like Liz Cheney and Hillary Clinton suggest that they speak for the majority of the American people. They most certainly do not. You know the jingle, right? For the best night's sleep in the whole wide world, visit MyPillow.com. It's true. It really is the best night's sleep in the whole wide world. I've been sleeping on MyPillow 2.0 for the last few weeks, and it is so comfortable. Can I be honest? I didn't really buy the whole Mike Lindell patented adjustable fill thing. I didn't know what that meant, adjustable fill. I was like, yeah, sure. The pillow's going to go flat. It doesn't go flat. You know how you buy a pillow at the store and you're like, oh, that's nice, and you sleep on it for a couple of days? I got a big, fat, heavy head. And all it takes is a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of nights where I get a little warm, and all of a sudden that pillow just... And a couple of weeks, my neck is cricked, and it's miserable. I've never had luck with pillows. Well, I tell you, this fill that My Pillow talks about and Mike talks about, it is adjustable, and it constantly stays. You adjust it at night, and your head is like even. It's not like cranked down. It's like I haven't laid on a pillow night after night for weeks that keeps my head even with my shoulders, but this pillow does. And now, because it's My Pillow 2.0, you say what makes it more special? Well, they've got a new fabric that dissipates heat and humidity on top of that. So it stays cool all night long. There is no flipping to the cool side of the pillow. The pillow stays cool. So it's that firmness and adjustability that you like, and it's also now cool to the touch. The fabric is soft. It's great. Couple that with the Giza Dream Sheets, the My Pillow body pillow. I feel like I'm sleeping on a cloud every night. I really have slept like a baby lately. Christine loves her My Pillow slippers. I sent my entire Chris Stigall Show team My Pillow travel pillows. Got a dog bed for Eddie and his dog. Dean, my dog, sleeps on a My Pillow dog bed. One of my associate producers is loving his Giza Dream Sheets and the slippers. Look, if you want really high-quality stuff, is it the cheapest? No. I'll just be honest with you. I know some people say, oh, it's expensive. Well, look, it's made in America. It has a 60-day money-back guarantee. It has a 10-year warranty on every single product Mike sells. So it's well made, and he stands behind it. So look, that comes, with a bit of a cost associated with it. That's true. You want something cheap and Chinese? Fine. Now, you're not going to find that at My Pillow. But if you want a really great discount on that, go to mypillow.com and use my name, Chris Podcast. If you type in Chris Podcast, it lets them know you listen, and I appreciate it. So the promo code is Chris Podcast. That gets you the discount on the stuff. You get a second My Pillow 2.0 if you order one. Chris Podcast is the code at mypillow.com or call 800-932-5056. A story in the Inquirer to kick off the week that was interesting to us because we kind of felt like we already knew the guy who had come up with this, but I don't understand science or medicine. So when I read this headline, Penn, that is the University of Pennsylvania, Penn scientists Carico and Weissman win Nobel Prize on Monday. It was awarded to them for, quote, discovering how to harness the power of messenger RNA, the genetic linchpin of the first vaccines against COVID-19. That led me to say to myself, I think we already talked to the guy who discovered the linchpin for the shots out there. And his name's Dr. Robert Malone, who we've had on the show as a guest before. He has been writing pretty extensively about this, and because most of us are not scientists, I don't know the first thing about this from any kind of deep understanding. So I thought we should call up the man himself so that we could get a better understanding of what we're reading that these Penn scientists have been awarded versus what has always been attributed to Dr. Malone's work, as far as I understood it. And so, Dr. Malone, we welcome you back to the show. I appreciate your time today. Hello.
Hi, Chris. So let's get into it.
Yeah, I'm just kind of confused as a general matter because what I hear these people want an award for is something that you've already done, or am I misstating that?
Yeah. No, it's the press that's misstating it. The specific quote from the Nobel Prize Committee is the award to Carico and Weissman, which I congratulate them for, was for their discoveries concerning the nucleoside base modifications that enabled the development of effective mRNA vaccines against COVID-19. So what the committee has done is very carefully carve out this award is for the COVID-19 vaccines. It is a fact that Carico and Weissman pioneered the incorporation of pseudouridine into the mRNA to make it a synthetic, non-biologic molecule that was used by Moderna and Pfizer BioNTech for their vaccines. That's true. Is that enabling? Because that's the second part of what the Nobel Prize Committee states in their justification for the award. It's actually not enabling that discovery. There's a company called CureVac that does not use pseudouridine that got perfectly good antibody responses to COVID-19 with their vaccine. but they used a lower dose, and they got a lower titer of antibodies, and basically they couldn't get the money to carry on. But it's not enabling this invention that they absolutely did make.
So
then the next part of the statement is that these mRNA vaccines are effective.
Yeah.
Notice the Prize Committee doesn't say anything about safe, and they don't say what they mean by effective. And then against COVID-19. So what they've done is basically carve out a little area without commenting on who actually made the original discoveries, and obviously that's intentional. I think that what we really have here is a propaganda statement from the Nobel Prize Committee on behalf of the Karolinska Institute, which, by the way, receives big money from Pfizer.
Robert Malone is with us, Dr. Robert Malone. You are, and again, for most of us who are non-scientists, your work in this field was not specifically, it wasn't specifically tailored to any one virus. Like their work, you're saying, was specific to COVID.
Absolutely. I had nothing to do with development of these vaccines.
Yeah.
And that's what the Nobel Prize was awarded for, was these vaccines. Another thing that the committee asserts in their press statement was that this discovery of Carrico and Weissman are what enabled these vaccines to be advanced so rapidly. But that's also false. What enabled them to be advanced so rapidly was the emergency use authorization process that bypassed the normal clinical trials and non-clinical development. And that's shown because the Russian vaccine called Sputnik was also developed very rapidly in about the same time frame, and it's a traditional vaccine. It did not employ any genetic delivery technology, and they also bypassed a lot of the norms. So what the basis for what's being awarded here is false, with the exception that Carrico and Weissman did have this discovery that pseudouridine modified RNA is immunosuppressive.
This write-up in the Inquirer, Dr. Malone, says when 3 decades ago Carrico began to study RNA and its possible uses in medicine, the concept struck many scientists as science fiction, they write. Among other issues, the delicate molecules were quick to degrade and caused harmful inflammation in lab animals. Carrico struggled to secure federal funds for her work, and as a result, in 1995, she was turned down for tenure at Penn. Yet she stuck with it, and upon joining forces with Weissman, the two eventually cracked the code. You quibble with any of that?
No, it's very similar to my own trajectory. I had rejection after rejection after rejection by the NIH for support of my own work, including using pulsed electrical fields under the thesis that the delivery problem had already been solved by Merck, which was false. But that's the way things go in modern medicine. It's very trendy. And Carrico and Weissman also deserve credit for basically having worked the politics of science very well. Went on the talk tour promoting the idea of using RNA as a vaccine. And eventually the government decided to fund that big time through DARPA, this developmental arm of the CIA. And that's what kicked this off. And that funding only came after my patents expired. Remember, Carrico's doing her work about 15 years after I did my work.
So this is an important, and I don't mean to malign these people. I'm just curious about funding. When we talk about federal funding, is there great money to be made here? Are these people, when they win a Nobel Prize, and specifically for COVID research, is there a lot of money changing hands here, or what should we know about these folks?
So winning the Nobel Prize, you get about $1 million US. Now, they previously also won the Lasker Award, which is also about $1 million each, I think. And that's the American Nobel Prize-like award that's granted by a investment fund. And similar awards from the Israeli government and the Spanish government. So they've pulled in many millions of dollars in these awards. And in addition, if you win the big prize, you're basically guaranteed a free ride for the rest of your scientific career, a high status. I'm sure Dr. Carrico will get a tenured position if she wants one now. That will be an endowed chair. I think Dr. Weissman already has something akin to that. So it's if you catch the brass ring here, you really are set up for the rest of your life. So yes, there has, and then there's the speakers' fees and consulting and all that kind of stuff. Obviously, Carrico is a vice president at BioNTech. So yeah, a lot of money here, and congratulations to them for capturing it. I think they've done a great job of working the politics.
No, it's wonderful. And so I will say this about that. Their work in COVID, they achieved it. It is true they achieved this thing, but you rightly point out efficacy. And its effect generally on, and the question, did it work? Is it working? Let's go back to that original question. Did it ever work, Dr. Malone? Did it ever work? Even in its original form when it was first rolled out and we were talking about the original strain of the virus. Was it ever effective in your view?
What I have to say to act with integrity and honesty and transparency is the original data that asserted something like 97% effectiveness, which the Nobel Prize cites, the committee cites, those studies were fraudulent. So as a consequence, we don't really know. You know that I'm sure many of your listeners have seen the montage where various people, including Dr. Fauci, make statements about the effectiveness that start at 97% and end up at 30 or less. All of that is very contrived. So it's really hard to go back and sort out what was real from what was propaganda back in the early days. I'm just putting out a Substack today based on the CDC slide deck the Washington Post revealed on July 30th of 2021 that clearly documents that the vaccines at that time were known by the government to be leaky and even together with masks to be ineffective to the level that they could never be used to provide herd immunity, which, of course, we were all told was the justification. So that's me talking around it and basically saying, I don't know. I don't know that any of us can really know what was true at the start because the studies were fraudulent. They were faked.
When Pfizer and Moderna and others use this technology that these scientists developed, is it purchased? Is it donated? The technology?
No, it's so they have received substantial money from royalties, as has Penn.
Okay.
My understanding is what happened here. And by the way, their patent on their discovery says nothing about vaccines as an application. None of their work really that's published talks about use for vaccines. This was a later edition turning to vaccines. But apparently the patent, I'm told, was sold to a broker who then with flowback clauses for Penn and Carrico and Weissman on royalties, and the broker then marketed it into BioNTech and into Moderna. Moderna initially didn't, for their earlier development work, didn't use this technology, just like CureVac doesn't use it. And they only switched, apparently under some pressure from the government or some entity, in the context of the COVID-19 product development. They had not licensed it previously. It was licensed only to BioNTech, where Katie Carrico was working as a VP.
I see. All right. So one can assume that there was great private money to be made as well, I assume.
Absolutely. Yeah. Huge money. And Penn got a bunch of it. Carrico and Weissman got some. And, of course, there's also huge money that went to the people that actually did develop these vaccines. CRICO really didn't have a major role in this. For instance, the Moderna vaccine was actually engineered by the Vaccine Research Center team at NIH. You may recall those press releases and video clips where Tony Fauci gave a tour, and we met various people there. All of those people have really largely retired now out of the government, quite wealthy.
Dr. Robert Malone with us. By the way, your book, Robert Malone, is Lies My Government Told Me and the Better Future Coming. He's on Substack, R.W. Malone, M.D. on Substack, R.W. Malone, M.D. on Substack. May I ask you, Doctor, today, it's been a while since you and I have talked. Vaccines generally, can you just talk to me about vaccines generally? Because I think people are maligned often because they question COVID in particular as a shot and its efficacy. Where do you come down on vaccine development and use today? What's worked? What's proven worked? What do you recommend? What do you recommend people question or think twice about?
So I'm not going to make recommendations over the radio because I'm a licensed physician.
Fair enough.
So I just don't do that. A general statement. Number one, I spent much of my career supporting the vaccine industry, which is why I have many haters, particularly in the children's health defense community. I specifically spoke out about my concerns on these vaccines, both ethically and in terms of their safety and effectiveness. In general, in my opinion, the pediatric vaccine schedule absolutely needs to be revisited. There are too many products administered in too close of a time frame that are very inflammatory to children. They're designed to be inflammatory, and that's not a good thing. And scientifically, the interaction of these has never really been examined rigorously, which is Bobby Kennedy's point. And they really largely have been grandfathered in. The nuances of how that works is another half an hour discussion, but because of a ethical constraint, they typically are not tested against a true negative control. They're tested against other vaccines that have similar properties. And so this hides their potential toxicities. And I think that the balanced way to address this is to say that the truth is that we really, and parents really don't have the information they need to make a well-informed decision about how they have their children vaccinated, against what, at what time. And there's an increasing trend to space out those vaccines that are accepted by parents for their children, rather than having them all compressed in a very short time around birth and early development, which is what the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices at the CDC advises. So this is all now going to be in flux. And I think that what we all really want is more data that clearly and unambiguously addresses what is the true safety and effectiveness, particularly of the pediatric vaccines. And there are pediatric vaccines that are helpful. There are vaccines in general. The yellow fever vaccine is quite effective and incredibly toxic.
Wow.
But if you're facing yellow fever and you're living down in Brazil and there's a wave of yellow fever that can kill you, well, then it may make sense to go ahead and take the yellow fever vaccine, even though it's a nasty piece of work.
Dr. Malone, I do. And here's the thing that I found. I've been thinking a lot about this. It's just been ruminating in my head for a while, just generally. This is not a huge, thoughtful concept, but I heard Tucker Carlson talking with Bill O'Reilly. And Bill O'Reilly was talking about how, there's so many people in this country that they lack kind of basic things that he believes they need help with. Legal advice, a good attorney, and a doctor, and good medical advice. And to which Tucker Carlson sort of snorted and derisively said, Oh, you trust doctors?
I can hear it now.
Yeah.
He has certain expressions that are just.
Yeah. He kind of snorted and said, "You trust doctors," and I think there's a healthy number of people in the country that now have this fundamental mistrust of people in medicine and pharmaceutical companies and pharmaceuticals generally. And have you experienced that? And what do you make of it, if so?
Absolutely. And more than that, it was entirely predictable, and I did predict it, that this jamming of not sufficiently tested products down the throats of the American people and our war fighters would predictably cause this counter reaction. When you take these kind of authoritarian measures, people who love freedom generally, get pissed off.
Yeah.
And you destroy trust. And there's no question that there has been a massive loss of trust in the medical profession and in the public health service of the United States, consequent to the gross mismanagement and overstepping that's occurred during the last 3 years.
How do you recommend, Dr. Robert Malone, we as patients and doctors, how do we reestablish a connection and a trust if, in fact, there's been an erosion of trust? Do you recommend we do something as patients?
Well, what I've observed in a growing trend is, number one, most physicians now are basically owned by these very large corporations, and they have no latitude here. So, maybe it's a crocodile tear, but at least a little bit of empathy that these folks are put in a box where they either lose their livelihood or they toe the line. But there are still a small subset of physicians. They often go under the banner integrative medicine or primary care in the United States. And this is a problem, by the way, throughout the Western world now. And those people that have basically maintained their composure, not gone crazy during the COVID crisis, continued to provide good, honest care to their patients, as opposed to kind of assembly line factory care. Their practices are exploding. Most of them all of them that I know are overwhelmed. They're booked for months.
You're talking about people that are kind of what you would consider concierge medicine, if you will, people that are private?
Yeah, private or under some sort of insurance. And there's new models for how to do this that are being developed. Simone Gold has one. Many others are developing them. And we have the increasing presence of telemedicine.
Yes.
That was authorized by Mr. Trump. And so medicine is in transition. It's clearly been corrupted and co-opted by the pharmaceutical industry and the big hospital chains and their financial backers. But there's a counter movement now, and patients that are questioning, let's say, because not all are, many are very much in the narrative, but those that are questioning and uncomfortable are seeking these people out. And a good litmus test, I think, that is good for all of us, because COVID is still around, is have you found a physician that is willing and able to give early treatment and experienced in it? And if not, you ought to find that doc. They're out there. A lot of them have operated underground because of all of the harassment that they've been subjected to. But they're out there. You can find them. Excuse me. You may have to pay a little bit more.
Yeah.
And
people are always asking me, and I know you don't dispense this kind of advice. Maybe you can't. But is there a source? Is there a website or any place in particular people could go research, or do you recommend how people would research those doctors?
There's a number of places where people are aggregating these physicians, but it's very risky.
Yeah.
To do so, because then that's used as a tool for the bots and trolls and the various strategies to attack people's medical licenses. And so generally, docs don't want to pop their head up because they're going to get shot.
Yeah. And
so you kind of need to network locally, ask your buddies, have you identified somebody? Often the one way is if you read about some doc that's getting attacked for providing early treatment, you might want to look them up. Paradox.
Become their friend, Dr. Robert Malone. And you're our friend. We're grateful for you and your perspective, sincerely. Thank you so much for all of your time today.
The Chris DeGaulle Show podcast.